going to be there. I'll plan on coming down there. So we can spend some time with you. That'll be fair.
No, absolutely not. I mean, this is not the team of the 90s.
If Quincy doesn't get cut, I think that I'd probably end up on practice squad, if that was possible. Maybe they cut me and I'm playing for somebody else.
I couldn't make myself do it. I was just like, done.
We did not want to play. Cleveland didn't want to play. It was a lousy game. Should have never played it.
America's team! America's team! That's who we are!
The success is undeniable, the popularity unequaled. Today, the Dallas Cowboys are one of the world's most celebrated sports franchises.
Keep going, take the next step. We're not done, take the next step.
But it all began simply as an unlikely dream.
This is truly a fascinating story of one man's desire, Clint Murchison Jr., his passion to bring professional football to Dallas. And to do so, he assembled an A-team of professionals to help him. Tex Schramm, Tom Landry, Bedford Wynn, and Gil Brandt.
As Hackney takes a handoff to pick up 7 yards.
In the 1950s, football was already king in Texas. Colleges dominated the sports landscape, with the high school game having nearly as big an impact. Professional football, it was an afterthought.
Navy fights back desperately.
Well, college football was very important, but pro football was hardly on the scene because there was lack of television and so forth. But high school football in Texas has always been dominant. I did read things about pro football and knew about it, but it wasn't so important because we didn't see it so much.
The NFL was so different then. I mean, we'd go up to New York from Texas and people wondered where we'd been when we came home, I mean, it was about like that. So, it was a different deal.
Professional football did make an attempt to launch in Dallas in 1952. It was, to say the least, a complete failure.
A brief flirtation in the early 50s with the NFL. The first team was called the Dallas Texans. It was shipped down here by an owner up in New York who'd gone bust, and they brought the team down here and quickly found out they didn't have enough of anything, players or money, and by November they'd gone bust.
With that, professional football in Dallas seemed a lost cause. However, that early failure would not deter one man, a man whose passion for the game knew no bounds, Clint Murchison Jr.
Yeah, Clint had been eyeing bringing professional football to Dallas since 1952. Felt that Dallas, being a big up-and-coming city, really should have professional football there. He tried for the better part of a decade to get it here unsuccessfully.
He had access to resources and he had vision and he had the drive to get it done. And it was in spite of the league at that, y'all probably aware of the league at the time. I mean, it was nothing like it is now, obviously. It was really like, baseball was America's game and football was like, big stepchild at the time. But Dad was just out there just pushing really hard.
What are you going to do? Just sit and let it get shakier? We've got to either move or not move.
Well, I'm not sure that you solved the part about getting shakier by moving in and trying to firm it, because you also run the risk of people, rather than face up to it, say, "Oh hell, let's forget it."
Well, yeah, but we've got to either get on or get off. We can't. We got a lot of things to do.
Born to one of the wealthiest men in the world, Clint Murchison Jr. was a brilliant man who earned a master's degree from MIT, yet developed a profound passion for the rough and tumble game of football.
He was an enthusiastic participant, both in prep school and in college, but at a club level. He was never large enough or good enough to participate at a varsity football level. He was just tiny, but he did intramurals, and they had a pretty developed intramural system. He began to play football. It just something clicked, and he just fell in love with it.
He was competitive, always competitive, but athletically he was challenged just purely because of his size. And but he developed a love for football somehow, and he wanted to bring winning football to his beloved city of Dallas.
Joining him in this quest to own an NFL team was Murchison's close friend Bedford Wynn, who also brought legal guidance.
Well, Clint and Bedford were friends from 6 years old, and they took tap dancing together, if you can believe it. So they had been fast friends all their lives, and Bedford was always involved in football, and Clint had the money, and Bedford had the know-how, and his dad was an attorney in Dallas, but had a lot of connections in Washington. So Bedford was able to secure the franchise, and then Clint had the money, so it was a perfect marriage. Clint was painfully shy, and Bedford was an overt person, and knew everybody's name, very friendly, outgoing. So I think that's what also helped their friendship and their business acumen mesh together well.
To assist them in reaching their goal, Murchison and Wynn hired former Los Angeles Rams executive Tex Schramm as a consultant in the fall of 1959 to help them navigate the NFL waters.
So he was a football guy. He knew how the NFL worked, had the relationships. He was hired, at the time he was working as president of CBS Sports, so he was kind of out of the NFL, but still had all of those relationships and the know-how.
My grandfather surrounded himself with a terrific group of executives, as did my dad early in his career. And so he did the same thing in football. So he wanted to bring in the best football minds that he could possibly find.
Are you going to be in Dallas next weekend?
This coming weekend? Yes.
You know where it's been at?
No, I don't.
Well, what I was going to say was I'm going to be in Los Angeles on Friday, and if you all are going to be there, like Saturday and so forth, I will stop by and, maybe where we've got some time we can sort of gather some loose things up, because we're only a week away from that damn...
Well, give me a call on Wednesday and I'll find out.
All right.
Although it's hard to fathom today, prior to purchasing an expansion franchise, Clint Murchison and his group looked into buying an existing NFL team, which surprisingly included Washington.
And I think you can understand this. In fact, Vic says, damn it, go take a certified check to George Preston Marshall for $1.5 million. See what he does. This is the reaction. Everybody seems to think that Marshall will sell. Now, I don't. I have no way of knowing.
He looked at buying other franchises. I think it was looking for an opportunity when the expansion franchise would be offered in Dallas, and he would sell that and move on or something. I'm not sure.
Let me say this, and this is something which I have nothing to base it upon, although I feel quite confident that this is true. Any club in the National Football League today can be sold within a month for $2 million. This I don't feel there is any question whatsoever about.
I do know that he had some interest in getting involved, perhaps purchasing the original football team in Dallas. He also made an effort to purchase the San Francisco 49ers at some point between the demise of the Dallas team and the formation of the Dallas Cowboys. He was a goal setter, and just early on he would do things. He would set goals, and then as a young man, and then was religiously pursue them and getting them done. And I think bringing a professional football team to Dallas was one of those goals he set at a very early age.
While Washington and San Francisco were seen as possibilities, more serious considerations were given to buying the Cardinals, a franchise that was failing as a second team in Chicago.
Frankly, I don't think it's for sale at a reasonable figure, because it's a deal. It's listed $50,000 to $100,000 a year, and presumably will continue to do that. If it's moved out of the city, you'd probably lose more than that.
Well, no, I think I don't know how I can. The Cardinal Club personnel-wise, is there's not that much difference between that personnel and the personnel on some better football teams.
Yeah, but it's the personnel, it's the market.
Well,
it's your drawing power is what you're talking about. Yeah, but I mean, if anybody bought that team, the figures he's talking about, you'd have to move it someplace. You couldn't leave it there.
Oh, I don't know.
Hell no. You sure as hell couldn't move it to Dallas.
Why?
Huh?
Why?
Because it's going to be it'd lose too damn much money here.
The Chicago Cardinals at the time was owned by Violet and Walter Wolfner. They were vehemently against expansion. However, they were looking to potentially sell or move their team, because in Chicago at the time, whichever team, the Bears or the Cardinals, was the home team, that's who got the TV revenue that week. They wanted to stay in Chicago, but they realized, we're probably going to have to move if we want to make some more money.
Start a new franchise here, Nick. What do you think the difference in the operation would be? Why do you think the Cardinals would draw any more in Dallas than a new franchise would?
Oh, because hell, we've got a football team. We've got Linden, we've got Cole, hell, you've got a made football team that could win 8 ball games next year.
Yeah.
I mean, hell, I would never hold out the promise that you could make money. But I will tell you this, there would be a remote possibility that you could make money next year.
In the end, however, come hell or high water, Murchison was going to bring his own expansion team to Dallas.
He had these resources, just part of the game. It's just like, for him, it was like they were to be used and enjoyed, and not like locked away somewhere. And so he just took advantage of what was there for him and ran with it. And nobody was there to really slow him down.
Tired of his attempts to bring an NFL franchise to Texas as well, local businessman Lamar Hunt announced plans to start the American Football League, with one of the teams in this upstart rival league being based in his hometown of Dallas.
Of course, as you know, Lamar Hunt his family is like some of the richest oil people in the world here in Dallas. So he pretty much bankrolled the entire league on his own to start with. And that, I think the threat of them being there was the reason, this is my opinion, that the Cowboys were put in here so quickly as a block.
Once we had the AFL starting up in Dallas and Houston, that's what really prompted certain people in the NFL to see that, hey, we need to get into these markets to compete with a rival league.
That sudden interest from the NFL prompted Murchison's group to push forward. Long before Dallas was officially awarded a franchise, though, Tex Schramm went about the business of building a team. His first move? Hire a former baby photographer who was an up-and-coming scout for the Rams and 49ers, Gil Brandt.
What will you have him doing, Jay?
Well, he will right away. The first thing he'll do is start looking at the Rams draft information next week, so that we're familiar with it before the draft. And then he'll organize a crew of 4 or 5 guys to go out immediately at the conclusion of this draft and sign the worthwhile players.
Yeah.
He wasn't affiliated with any specific team. And I think that was very appealing for Clint to say, we're dancing around, trying to grease these wheels and get this expansion through, not trying to upset or offend anybody, trying to sway people's minds. So having somebody independent that wasn't biased to any team or owner or faction was helpful for them. They were getting just pure, unbiased scouting evaluation of talent.
What happened is Tex called me in October of 1959. And he said, Gil, I got a job for you. He said, now the first thing I want you to do is get as much stuff that you can from the Rams without them knowing you're taking it, so that we know what free agents to go ahead and sign.
I have got a deal where we are covered on draft information, where I have access to all the Rams draft information as soon as this November draft is completed. And then if we are to be allowed to select from players that have been drafted, they will give me the information on all of the players, all the information they have on all the players except the players that they personally drafted.
All right, you couldn't ask anything more than that.
So you can't, so we're completely covered now on all the information we could ever need. We just, with the information that's being possible to duplicate. So that problem is out of the way.
And he encouraged Gil Brandt to work with him and develop scouting and information on players and trends like nobody had before in pro football.
After meeting Schramm in New York, Brandt's next stop was Dartmouth University, where he signed the organization's very first player, halfback Jake Crowthermill.
We signed him for $7,500, no signing bonus or anything like that. And I couldn't wait to get out of the house because I made this big conquest. And I went across the road to the Big Bear Inn or White Bear Inn or something like that. And, you have to drop $3.75 into the coin machine. And I said, hey, Tex, we just signed our first guy. How much do we pay? Well, we paid $7,500. Gosh, I can't trust you. We'll be out of business. Because we've only been paying $5,000, $4,500, $5,500 to a player. So now, we're $2,000 over a high sign is what it was. And so that was the first player that we signed.
Brandt would go on to build a network of college sources across the country. And while those connections would eventually pay huge dividends, getting players to actually sign back then proved difficult.
But the greatest thing was, what's the name of the team? Well, we don't have a team name right now. But we will have one. But we didn't even have a franchise.
Despite Brandt beating the bushes for potential free agents, what the franchise really needed was a star, someone it could build around, someone who could draw fans. Someone like SMU All-America quarterback Don Meredith.
But win or lose, the Ponies never lost the passing touch of dashing Donald Meredith, and here he is in action again. A most amazing fellow.
he kind of came up around October, and then around November, what happened is George Halas, everybody was banking that they were going to get the expansion through. They didn't know, and it was kind of a rocky road. No one was really sure, but they wanted to be prepared in case it happened. Halas knew the most important player in the field is your quarterback. He decides, we'll draft him in the 1959 draft, or that November, for $60, and we'll hold him for you. So the Cowboys signed him to a personal services contract. Halas signs him to an NFL contract. But it wasn't free. We still had to give the Bears a third-round pick in 1961 for that.
In the case of Meredith, who may not want, tax-wise, it may not be good for him getting first-year salary plus sizable bonus all in 1 year.
Yeah.
Or the salary, or the large salary he'll be getting over his full each year, is to work out a deal of where, like, $2,000, $3,000, $4,000, $5,000 are expenses to him for promotional duties.
Right.
12 months out of the year.
Yeah. Well, of course, we're going to have him on a salary the rest of the year, too, so that can be worked out.
All right. Right. You don't get any problem there.
No. In fact, we had a meeting on him this afternoon, and we'll have something definite on him by a week from today.
All right. Wonderful.
The Dallas franchise signed the star quarterback to a personal services contract on November 28, 1959, 2 days before the NFL draft, outbidding Lamar Hunt and the rival AFL's Dallas Texans. With players slowly but surely being added to his potential team, Murchison needed one more final piece for his front office puzzle, a head coach. That head coach would become a legend.
Originally, when news started getting out that they were looking to get this franchise, everybody around Dallas was sending them letters. Everybody that played high school football or coached at a junior college was sending them letters and why I think would be a good head coach. They're getting all these unqualified candidates. Well, Clint was going to do this thing right.
When it came to finding someone who could lead the team on the field, one name originally stood at the top of the list: Los Angeles Rams head coach Sid Gilman.
I am positive after my visit in Detroit that he's going to be available.
You think he will?
And I'm damn sure about it. In fact, I got into quite a lengthy discussion with Reeves about it.
Uh-huh.
And they do not attach what's happened to them to him, but they feel that
they've got to make a change.
They've got to make a change.
Yeah.
And I said, well, now, we can help on this thing by making it a smooth transition. And I said, when are you going to definitely know? And I said, secondly, I don't want Gilman to know anything about the Dallas thing, and I don't want him to know anything about me until you have told him that he is through. Because I want him hungry.
Yeah.
Here, actually, about a month later, an associate that worked in one of Clint Murchison's entities named O.P. Corley was actually one of Tom Landry's neighbors in Dallas. So O.P. Corley typed up a letter and sent that to Bedford Wynn, telling him, he's my neighbor here in Dallas. He's a defensive coordinator at the Giants. He used to be a player. And that I feel like he's kind of reaching the end of his time in New York. He's a Dallas guy. His family's here, would probably want to come back. And actually, Corley had been up there for a game a week before he wrote this letter and had dinner with him. And thinking about the Dallas thing, hey, I should let them know.
Let me ask you this. Do you have any problem getting tickets for the Giant games in New York?
Yeah, hell of a problem.
Are they?
Yeah.
Well, I'll talk to you about that later.
Okay.
Might have to go to Mara, but I think I'm going to be up there on the 6th.
Is that the Cleveland game? Yeah. Oh my God. Yeah. You've already announced it. We can go to Mara.
Make Gene Kirby get it.
Undoubtedly, the planned trip to New York on December 6, 1959 involved more than just catching a game. Wynn and Murkison were scouting Landry, the Giants' defensive coordinator, to be their potential new head coach.
Tex wanted to hire another coach. Ultimately, Dad prevailed, and Tom was hired, and began the a long history of winning football with the Cowboys.
When he got hired by the Cowboys, Mother and Dad wanted to get back to Texas. I think he could have taken the New York job, from what I understand. But he wanted to come back to Texas, but he didn't expect to last very long because of an expansion team. And he, figured that early on you would lose, and that would be that. And then he'd go into engineering or insurance or whatever his career would be.
But I think being a Texas guy, people identify and a war hero like the greatest generation. They respected him. I mean, everybody respected him. So I don't think there was anybody that didn't respect him, including the players. Most importantly, the players.
I think that Tom was ready to be a head coach. And I think that Texas' relationship with Mara was very important. And so that here we are, we're going to be in Dallas. Tom is living in Dallas. And so I think it was a natural fit. And it was probably one of the greatest hires of all time.
But this money thing's going to be a ticklish situation.
Well, I'm sure it is. I'm sure it is.
And the reason I say this is maybe, when I don't want to set Clint off on to get him all excited or anything.
Yeah.
But you better weigh very carefully how much you want to press for things, because they are going to come back and say, well, if you're paid $1 million, maybe you're entitled to it.
Yeah.
So you're going to have to. That's going to be the answer to when we press.
With the likes of Tex Schramm, Gil Brandt, and now Tom Landry trying to gather a roster of players, one small little matter still remained. Murkison still hadn't officially been awarded an NFL team.
I'm pretty sure they're going to go for the $600,000. But the ones I talked to aren't happy. And this is the feeling that I got from three sources on separate occasions. The franchise is worth $2 million. If you're going to get the damn thing for $600,000, don't think you're going to get a lot of players. Don't think you're going to get a hell of a lot of concessions.
Yeah.
And Clint was very careful to pick his battles. He knew he could throw money at that problem. Not that anybody wants to do that, but okay, I can throw money at that. You can't force people to vote yes for your expansion. So, a little give and take, quid pro quo. We'll pay that, sure. Not a problem.
I don't know how, I have no way of knowing how widespread this is. I have no way of knowing how serious it is. All I know is that there are questions that are starting to be asked.
That's the reason I think it ought to be. There'll be a couple of dissidents tending to, do this. I think they ought to all be pinned down right now before they get too much conversation around about it.
Well,
all they can do is say no. I mean, they're going to do. To me, they're more likely to do it in January than they are today.
No, one of the bad things now is that Hallis just can't spend the time on it that he should spend on it. And he's not going to be able to do it until the season's over.
One of the biggest opponents against expanding to Dallas was Washington owner George Preston Marshall.
Now, Marshall was against expansion really for one reason. There wasn't any team in the South and Southwest, so all the TV profits from down south were going to Marshall. So if there was an expansion team, that was going to immediately cut into his bottom line, and that's what he did not want.
Murkison, though, had an ace up his sleeve.
One afternoon in 1958, Barney Breeskin, a Washington, D.C. band leader, called Tom Webb, an associate of mine living in the same city. Barney, it seems, had written the music to the official song of that team, and the late George Preston Marshall, owner of the team, wished to obtain legal title to the song. Tom would buy the song and sell it to Marshall.
When he arrived in Florida for the NFL owners' annual meeting, Murkison was still 2 votes shy of the 10 needed to get his expansion franchise. Knowing this, he paid a visit to Marshall's hotel room.
Say, Clint, Marshall began, there's a fellow working for you who has my song and he won't give it to me. You're kidding. Who in the world is that? Tom Webb. Hey, George, I can take care of that in a minute. Where's the phone? Tom gave George the song. George gave me his vote for admission into the NFL, and I gave Barney $2,000.
They now needed one more vote. For that, George Halas stepped in and took advantage of a stalemate in the election of a new league commissioner to garner support from one of today's biggest rivals.
It's the New York Giants, so Jack and Wellington Mara. He goes to them, he says, hey, I haven't voted on a commissioner. We've got, we're right there on this compromise candidate. I'll vote for him with you guys if you help me get this expansion vote there.
The NFL was coming back to Texas. Murkison had his franchise, the Dallas Rangers.
Yeah, the name the Rangers was Clint's idea, and he explained it as like a bolt of lightning out of the sky hit him, Rangers. His grandfather had been a Texas Ranger. He felt it was a very proud and strong name, had roots in Texas with the Texas Rangers. He was very enthralled with that name.
In truth, Schramm hated the nickname as a local minor league baseball team was already using it, and he eventually convinced Murkison to make a change. The team becoming the Cowboys in April of 1960.
Originally, Clint did not like Cowboys. He described it after that phone call picking the Cowboys' name, that he just had an empty feeling in his stomach for quite a while. Interesting thing is he spent quite a bit of time working on the decal on the logo, and when you look at our helmet, what do you see? The blue star. That star looks an awful lot like the Texas Rangers badge.
In order to help its newly named franchise in Dallas, the NFL sought to help stock the team through an expansion draft.
It is not anywhere near as favorable as the previous one. Well, anyway, basically what it is they protect 22 players. They protect 22 players. Then we select 2 players. And then they protect 6. And we select 1, and then they protect 2, and then we select 1. No, so that's not anywhere near as favorable. I'll say it isn't.
They knew that to get owners on board with the expansion, they didn't want to, take all their good players and give them any reason to like expansion even less. So they kind of came up with a deal where each team would protect 22 or so players. No one could touch. And essentially they were given the opportunity to offload players that were at the end of their careers or weren't very good, people they took a chance on that didn't work out, and build this big pool for Dallas to select from.
Now, it also has in here that same bonus arrangement on the draft, which would come next year, where we get 1 bonus pick before the draft starts and then 1 bonus pick after the first round.
For some, like former SMU players Dave Shearer and Don McElhenney, the expansion draft meant a chance to go home.
Cowboys and Dave Shearer sends a towering punt off.
Oh, the first thing that happened was that Weeb Eubank was my coach at Baltimore, and he came to me and said, "Look, they're having an expansion draft. I'd like for you to stay because I've been looking for a punter for 5 years, and I finally found one." And I said, "Coach, I'd really like to go to Dallas."
But I had a brand new house, normal mortgage, and wonderful bunch of children. I was having a good time, but I should have felt and known things just sort of coming to an end for Don.
It was really a happy occasion to get to Dallas, although I left a championship team at Baltimore.
First of all, we had 50 free agents signed. And the way we assembled the team was that on, like, say, Wednesday at 6 o'clock at night, we got this list of players from the other 12 teams in the National Football League. And we were able to pick 3 from each team. But we had to do it by Friday is when we had to do it. So it's not like you had a whole year to think about it. But we really did pretty good. You know, we got Frank Clark out of it. We got Jerry Tubbs out of it. We got some players out of it that played for pretty well for a long period of time.
Unfortunately, many of the players selected or signed as free agents were already past their prime or, in truth, never really had one to begin with.
It was not easy because the team that we had was mostly, we had Abe Gibran, who was about 10 years past his prime, and Charlie Ane, who wouldn't sign with us because he had a job in Hawaii where he was making $22,000 a year, and we wouldn't pay that much.
Cowboys are counting heavily on Don McElhenney to do a majority of their groundwork.
It didn't come to me that it was going to be as tough as it was. I mean, all of a sudden we didn't have Forrest Gregg at left tackle. Forrest Gregg was my team at SMU and one of the best tackles in history, Hall of Fame. I mean, none of the guys that we're going to play with were Hall of Fame, for sure.
Don McElhenney, number 42, gets the call from close range, and Don rides hard to score as the Cowboys give the Steelers a
Not surprisingly, given that they were an expansion team, the inaugural 1960 season was, to say the least, a difficult one on the field.
It was pretty obvious. You put those people together, it's pretty hard to take guys that never have played with each other. I didn't have that so much as being a punter and a tight end, but I did mostly the punting. And you knew that we weren't doing that good when I could punt a lot during the game. So
we just didn't have enough football players. But all the football players thought they were being picked and everything, that they were real good football players, and they were. I was pretty good too, but not what we needed.
The Cowboys went winless, losing 11 of their 12 games and managing only a 31-31 tie at the New York Giants.
Bomb in the hands of Bill Houghton for the final score of the game. The Dallas Cowboys pull even in the final minutes, tying the Giants 31-31 in their greatest effort of the campaign to end the New York.
Of course, the Cowboys flew back that night on their chartered plane, and so they land out at Love Field and get off, and it's cold and rainy, and there's 2 fans standing over near the ramp where they're getting off, holding a sign that said, "Well done, Cowboys." And Chuck Schramm said, "Well, that's a start."
You look through that first season and through the games, and you look at their profits and their liabilities, and they lost $700,035. So they lost a little over $2 million if you count their total investment and then what they lost, which today would be, a little over $6 million, something around that, and it was like $500,000 a month through that first year that they were just bleeding cash. So, you know, you're losing, you're trying to build this team and root this in Dallas, and you've got the AFL, you know, the NFL's competing with now, and then you just are losing tons of money.
Still, despite the disappointing outcome to the 1960 season and the huge losses financially, there was a little frustration or discouragement. After all, professional football was back in Dallas and here to stay.
Team rolling into pay dirt. After the conversion, the Never Say Die Cowboys trimmed
I think the fans here were not sophisticated enough to know, like, what should they expect, how long it's going to take to be a winner. Well, I think the fans were kind of happy they had a NFL franchise. They were wanting it to be better, but I don't think they had enough history to be so angry.
Nobody expected us to be any good, and we didn't disappoint them. And so, you know, you just got to take it little by little. You're building. We had a great owner who understood what the game plan had to be in order to build a team over time, and he didn't get panicky because we were losing, and he supported us, and we kept building until we finally got what we were looking for.
What the Cowboys did have was a foundation formed from a relationship between an owner and 3 Hall of Famers who together would create a dynasty.
Oh, I think they had a tremendous relationship. I mean, Clint was extremely supportive. He was always there for us if we needed him, but he didn't insert himself into trying to do something. Dad and Clint were very similar. They're both very quiet and very witty, and so they sort of could talk each other's language. And it was a great relationship.
And the only time he ever told me something about coaching was that he said, Bobby Hayes, we got Bobby Hayes, the fastest guy. You ought to run him on a reverse. And I said, oh, I didn't say much. I just looked at him. And the next game I ran Bobby on a reverse, and he lost 10 yards. And Clint says that's the last time I ever told Coach Landry anything.
He was in the background, but he was extremely close with Schramm and with Landry, the people that mattered. He was extremely close to them, and they developed really strong, very tight relationship because they knew that Dad was there thick and thin, that he was, if they needed something, they could turn to him.
You know, historically, people look back and, oh, he was such a great owner because he didn't have his hand on anything. Well, that's just not true. He just knew where to put his hand, how much, when, at the right time,
Today, the success is undeniable. 520 regular season wins, 33 playoff appearances, 8 NFC titles, 5 Super Bowl championships. America's team. And it all began with the passion of one man, Clint Murkison Jr. His NFL dream became Dallas reality.
It was just totally a love of the game. It really helps in any business just to have a real passion for it, and Dad had that real passion for football and its possibilities.
Yeah, it was extraordinary how he felt the depth of his feeling for the coaches, the Schramm, the team, and the sense of accomplishment and stuff. I mean, it was it's probably one of the kind of the driving passions of his life.
I think that this football team is not only the best in the National Football League, which we demonstrated yesterday, but one of the best in the history of the National Football League.
And that was Clint Murkison Jr., who was the founder of the Cowboys. He had the courage to go with an expansion team, and he had the courage to go with me as his general manager.
Mr. Murkison has never received the proper national recognition for his contributions to the NFL. His vision in 1960 of what a pro football team should look like led into one of the showcase franchises in NFL history. His resounding commitment to Tex, Tom, and myself was the foundation of what has become today's America's team.
And I believe that Clint Murkison was probably the one person that enabled us to go 20 years with winning season, because he took the pressure off of me, took the pressure off of Tex Schramm, and took the pressure off the organization. And that's what makes great teams and great dynasties.
Well, I'll try to get all my questions and so forth, then call me again Wednesday.
Well, I'll call you Wednesday, and then if you're both gonna be there, I'll plan on coming down there. So we can spend some time over the weekend.
That'll be fine.
All right, Beth.
Okay, Dick.
Right. Bye.